What's the weirdest rabbit hole you ever fallen into on the internet? There is a company, Inge, that is the top glitter manufacturer in the world. When being interviewed, they were asked who their biggest client was. They refused to answer, saying they don't want people to know. Cue millions of people speculating on who the biggest glitter client in the world is and why they want to keep it secret. The American chestnut blight. What was once the redwood of the East Coast was practically wiped out in the early 20th century due to imports of trees from Asia that contained the blight fungus but were resistant. Today, we have the technology to bring back the American chestnut using minor gene modification, I believe, from wheat. But I don't believe federal approval has yet been granted to reintroduce. To me, this is a fascinating bit of science where we have the power to bring back an almost forgotten yet iconic species. I find this an incredibly interesting topic and went down quite the rabbit hole. There's a doc called The Bridge which captured 23 of the 24 suicides from the Golden Gate Bridge in 2004. Apparently the bridge is wildly popular suicide site. By 2004, there have been more than 1,200 suicides with a 98% death rate. Anyway, it's really dark and sent me on a little research expedition of the suicides. Apparently, the 2% that survive say they instantly regretted jumping midair. And that starts to make you think about suicides and how much pain people are in to take that step. And yet there is a shock of clarity once they've done the irreversible. Just reading about that desperation and sadness triggered so much in me. I really can't go down those rabbit holes anymore. I went down the rabbit hole about the Silk Road Marketplace, the illegal black market site on the deep web. I always found it fascinating that one singular dude was able to attribute so much to drug trafficking simply from his laptop. The whole story is so intriguing to me. It's actually one of the reasons I went into my current field, which is cybersecurity. The internet is such a vast and enormous place. The amount of crime that occurs simply from people's computers has always mind-boggled me. One of my favourite books is Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. One of my favourite movies growing up was Flight of Dragons. I randomly fell down a rabbit hole and found out they are super connected. A guy wrote a fictional natural history book called The Flight of Dragons, and he was inspired to write it after reading Wizard of Earthsea because he was so curious how our dragons would maintain flight. Rabbit hole kept going, but I just found such joy in knowing a lot of the things I loved as a child were so connected. Afghanistan. Not weird in the literal sense, but more so how deeply investing was regarding their history, the tribes, the violent uprisings, all of it. The telltale is that they're a culture of warriors. For instance, one of their tribes, the Hazara, are descendants of Genghis Khan. Kind of helps give their history some context, as they're mainly tribes of fighters. The oddest part of it all is what set me down the rabbit hole, a random painting found in the dumpster. I'm not into art, but this one did something to me. My roommate threw away some of my vintage silverware rather than wash it. I stored the rest of it away and then turned to the internet to find replacements. In the process, I found out that the manufacturer was the money-making branch of a cult in upstate New. They believed Jesus had already come back to earth, that it was possible for them to create heaven on earth, that eugenics would help create a community of perfect people. They believed in free love, but fucking for pregnancy had to be approved by the cult. To train young men for good pull-out game, they encourage older women in the community to train them. It might have been the origin of the cougar trend. There's a YouTuber by the handle of Thang. All he posts are designs for things like gear systems and basic machines made in SolidWorks, but something about them just makes them so entrancing to watch. I'm pretty sure they are just some retired mechanical engineer just keeping himself occupied. The British government's apparently successful ongoing operation to hide all the atrocities Britain has committed over the centuries. They were still operating concentration camps, a concept they invented in Africa up to the years. I got into it after talking to several Brits about the Irish potato famine. They learn in school that the government sent food aid and set up various support schemes to help out. That's where their education about it stops. They don't learn that those schemes were stopped after a few months, and the government switched priorities to exporting food from Ireland for the rest of the famine years. The famine went on for 7 years. After that, I looked at what they did in India and all over Africa. British people have no idea. All of it done in their name. This isn't history. The last government passed legislation to cover up what the army and security services did in Northern Ireland. The current government is under pressure from the EC and UN and families of victims to reverse it. I'm not saying what they did was either wrong or right, but they're covering it up, so. Ingran toenail removal. It's weird. Unless they've changed how they do it or there's other methods. They numb the toe, take more if it's infected, cut the long way down the nail, and pull it out, not the whole nail, just kind of the bit that's been digging in, but the whole length down, and dab the root with acid to prevent that part of the nail from ever growing back, and if they accidentally pull it along the rest of the nail, it'll eat away at it, which is fun since it can crack as it's growing out. Overall really neat, other than the part where it wasn't completely numb and they had to stop to put more numbing in when they were cutting into it. But what made it even more fascinating is that it had been ingrained for a very, very long time on both sides of both big toe sink over years sort of long, and I was scheduled to go in for the second one a few weeks later, and it cleared up entirely on its own in that time. I can only guess that maybe the body was free to fight the infection better on the other one. Or maybe it figured out what happened on the first and was like, holy shit. So that's what we were missing, like some sort of surgery-based immune response. Time cube. Until you can tear and burn the marshmallow to escape the evil one, it will be impossible for your educated, brilliant brain to know that. 4 different corner harmonic 24-hour days rotate simultaneously within a single 4-quadrant rotation of a squared equator and cubed Earth. Mechanical keyboards. I wanted to buy one, so I started researching and watching videos of reviews. I went deeper and deeper, seeing special cables, obscure companies, the tons of switches, etc, etc. I stopped when a YouTuber I watched made a video asking her viewers and Discord users to stop bullying and harassing her for using some kind of switches or keycaps. I bought my keyboard and never went back to that crazy fandom. Not super weird, but back in the lates when the internet was new, I found a website that had every originals G. Joe action figure. The nostalgia kicked in and I spent like 3 hours very slowly downloading photos of every action figure I had as a kid. The weird thing was I was only like 19 and I was looking at figures that were maybe 10, 13 years old. Oklahoma City obituaries. This was last night when I had insomnia. Clicked on a Reddit account whose last comment was late 2022. The last couple posts were about her being old and ill, possibly it being her last Thanksgiving. She had a lot of comments to read through, a lot of Breaking Bad, animals, and her family. Many little anecdotes painting a picture of who she is or was. Estranged daughter in the Navy and how she's heartbroken she doesn't even know her granddaughter's name. An adult autistic son who relied on her being a stay-at-home mom. Her older husband was in the military, so they had to move a lot, and how he's bad with money. She's wheelchair bound and attached to an oxygen tank, but she still wanted to get her stories out somehow. She posted frequently on the Oklahoma City subreddit and her age, so I went Googling. None of the obituaries match up. Who knows if it's my Google skills, lack of online obituaries, or if she's still alive. At some point I stopped searching and just kept reading through the newly deceased and whatever quirks their family members chose to reveal. All those little old ladies, and where they met their husbands, a lady who loved cats despite her allergies, a MAGA supporter guy my age who liked Glee, to know how to feel, and what I wanted to find at the end of the rabbit hole, to the random lady on the other side of the world, I hope you're okay. Started on Wikipedia trying to find the name of the actress that played Lois Lane in the old television series Phyllis Coates BE, and just by following links ended up with a story about a porn star living in the tunnels of Las Vegas, Jenny Lee. Midway through this was a murder kidnapping story and a cocaine condo money laundering just to make it even more weird. Superman murder kidnapping former prankster living in tunnels. There was an Ask Reddit about glory hole experiences about a year or so ago, knowing nothing about them except what they are, the people who frequent them. The engineering aspect of building nuclear weapons. There is probably no more useless topic to be informed about. The information is questionable and unverifiable. There is no real-world application and it's a complex and difficult to understand topic. I strongly recommend anyone starting down this road to Google Bardcore instead and spend time in a comparatively productive manner. This is back when Facebook was actual people in like 2010, 2012, and not just bots and ads. I was still Facebook friends with some former childhood friends that we have drifted apart long ago, and now they've grown to be associated with scumbags. My favourite Sunday pastime while recovering from a hangover on the couch would be to peruse their very public craziness. One day I saw a nutty status that one of my former scumbag associates commented on, so it appeared on my feed. I decided to dive into his rabbit hole. This dude I never met's profile was dozens of posts, multiple paragraphs long, that he posted rapid fire. It was like the unhinged ravings of a madman, and it was awesome. I spent like 3 hours that afternoon going through them. They included content about aliens, God, demons, government conspiracy, flat earth, crystal orbs, the power of love and the soul, you name it. Finally, I got to the first somewhat sane post that read, I paraphrase, "Going to try ketamine for the first time, wish me luck." Back in the earlies, I stumbled upon a website whereas the only content was this one man's Walmart receipts. He'd go shopping, then scan and upload his receipts for people to see and comment on. He'd done this for a few years by the time I found his website. I spent like 3 days looking at Walmart receipts because, after a while, they kind of started to tell a story. The guy got married, had a kid, and I left off around the time the kid was potty trained. It was like a journal written in Walmart receipts. You could follow him through the seasons, whether he had a cold, birthday cards and gifts for family, and see the growth of his child all through his Walmart purchases. It was fascinating. Underground Facebook. Though I have an ex from a little before the pandemic who has a degree in computer science and she is the most resourceful, let's say programmer, if known. I was unaware of her talents at first, and I bailed after seeing her casually doing things that not a lot of people know how to do, plus she's a demon. She showed me underground Facebook one day. I was blown away. It's Facebook, but you have to know how to type the names of the accounts to get there, and they use multiple keyboards to avoid the watchful eyes. Like, this was disturbing. There were accounts like, for example, named like this. There is some really suspicious stuff there. I think there is probably human trafficking going on, you name it. Like, you might come across a roommate advertising post and see a picture of a living room and a female minor sitting down on the sofa in the background. This was about 7 years ago. We live in a scary world, my friends. I feel uncomfortable knowing how many monsters live among us and casually stuff out in the open. I used to research the evil shit common companies do in the US and overseas. Nestle is one most people are aware of nowadays, but they also own several other water mining companies disguised as local brands. I heard of one nearby shitty deal and found the water rights were handed over for a measly few $1,000 bribe. Nestle said they'd even dig us another water source, so we'd be all set. They did dig another well, but it was shoddy work and dried up almost immediately, leading to major drought in the area that persists to this day. Lil corporate bait and switch. I guess it's not that weird, but I still find it weird companies can do evil shit like this and never face anything more than a fine. They know they have the resources to say and do anything they'd like. My wife once told me about this particular subset of Brazilian women who dedicate their lives to their tzos in prison. They spend all week making gigantic Tupperware buckets of food, buying snacks and supplies, toothpaste and deodorant, etc. Then will meet up with other women and take the bus, often hours away, down to the prison to visit their partners, give them their snacks, of conjugal visits and whatever. They have to dress a certain way and bring everything in clear plastic duffel bags. It's a whole culture, and even have businesses dedicated to selling the clear bags and specific clothes. I spent hours on TikTok watching these guys putting together their tzos jumbo for that week. It's a whole culture and it is fascinating. They call themselves Conahadas or something, sisters-in-law. I fell down a giant rabbit hole and wound up debunking the 25-year-old animation conspiracy that claimed The Lion King was a rip-off of Kimba the White Lion. I started watching old episodes of To Catch a Predator a few years ago on YouTube. That led me down the Lorne Armstrong rabbit hole. Lorne was one of the predators caught on the show, and fans of the show have been catfishing him ever since he got out of prison. Those of us who keep up with the Lorne saga are called Lornographers, and we belong to the Church of Cod.